like growing up, you were probably just like me. You're always taught when in kind of a work environment, there's two things you never discuss: religion or politics. And
Mhm.
there are companies now that if you don't if you don't wear your politics on your sleeve, you are a suspect,
Mhm.
right? Like if you try to just keep it, and that's extremely poisonous and destabilizing because in many cases, half your audience is not going to agree with you. And how are you going to work with these people if they don't trust you, right? It's one thing to say, look, I fall on this side of the political spectrum, but like I just care about the business. I want to make sure that I focus on doing the right thing and treating people fairly. The moment you introduce all this stuff, it just you have kind of a balkanization of the workforce. So
I know that my job became a lot more, and again, I even agreed with my boss. I did not vote for Trump either time, but she was just so virulently anti-Trump that it kind of made going to work even kind of like I just don't want to hear this. I don't want to. And then the fact that she was very much a you must vote Democrat no matter what person, and again. I don't cotton to that. I'm a Bernie supporter, and just I didn't vote for Biden, and she basically said, if you don't vote for the Democrat, you know, she couldn't have done anything to me. Like she couldn't didn't have higher firepower over me, but it made it really uncomfortable for like there's the last like half a year or so I worked there because she was constantly talking about politics and talking about how we all have to vote for Democrats and how Bernie is terrible and all this and it's like I don't care if we agree. I just don't want you to talk about this all the time. It just made it really, and I would feel the same way about a conservative boss. It's like
yeah,
I just I don't I feel there are some things that politics don't need to get into, uh, and that's one of them.
well, so like the institutions that I've gone to, I've always been outnumbered, right? But I learned how to have civil discussions on ideas without, based on ideas rather than, what tribe. Another thing most people don't realize is that, like the difference between, traditional kind of in the U.S. I should say traditional because it's not traditional. That's not the traditional definition of liberals. But if you look at the right and left in the U.S., or you just say traditional conservative and liberal, there are actually biological differences between the two, right? So in terms of, I think Jonathan Chait, I probably messed up his name. He's actually done very interesting research on this, but I think the medulla oblongata, right? It's something to do with the size of it or whatever, and with the ranking of threat perception, right? And conservatives tend to, the way their brains are structured is that they're more apt to recognize threat, right? Which is why they're less likely to try new things and experiment, like liberals are, right? But it's also why they make up the majority of the military and things like that because and it's based on kind of more of a traditional approach and things like that. One of the authors in Weird World War IV, Stephen Barnes, I think has one of the simplest but also best explanations behind the kind of eternal dynamic between kind of liberals and conservatives over time. And this is his. I'm assuming he made this up. I don't know where he got this, but I think it's true. You have this constant push and pull between liberals, which you need lots of change in order to propel a civilization forward, but you need conservatives to maintain some semblance of stability. Because if you change the culture too fast, you create tons of instability in the system and could unravel civilization to the same extent that if you keep civilization too stable and too stratified, you also set set into motion the things that you need for revolution. And again, you increase instability. So right now, I think we're going through, as a species, one of the most rapid times of change that we ever have because of the technology in our Cro-Magnon, not Cro-Magnon, but our tiny brains are just incapable of changing this quickly. And that's what, and it
There
doesn't
was this
help.
one tweet.
Go ahead.
I was in, this one tweet I saw this morning was something like, "This is not the worst time of history to be living through, but it's definitely the most absurd time."
Yeah, it's a Chinese curse, right? May you live in interesting times. And we're certainly living in interesting times. And so this goes to the next piece, because I think you and I are like feeding off each other on some of this. How do we get out of this?
How do we
get out of this?
get out of this? I wish I knew. It's not going to end until people start talking straight with each other, until people start actually like saying things. And it's really hard. Like, it's hard for me even to like talk about like the COVID stuff, because it's like, I don't know if somebody isn't going to want to shake my hand after that, even though I'm vaccinated, and even though I wear a mask when I'm told to, kind of thing. It's really only going to stop if people start pointing it out. I actually have a story right now that I'm working on where people, like, there's this basically this giant, massive, out in the open conspiracy going on through by these businesses, and everybody knows it's happening, and everybody's talking about it, but nobody seems to really care. And that's the other thing. It's like a lot of people are saying this needs to stop. They're saying, we need to stop deplatforming. We need to have but it feels almost like people don't really care that much.
Well, they're scared. They're scared.
Yeah.
Right? They want somebody to take a stand, but every time somebody takes a stand, I'm trying not to use kind of loaded language, but they're deplatformed, or they lose their jobs, or there's just it's going too far. And in fact, at least from what I see on the conservative side, the people who are most apt to survive these attacks don't apologize, right? No matter what they did, they just don't apologize.
Yeah, you just don't apologize ever.
Because like the people who do, they just get, they're just pulverized into dust, and then they're done. They're done forever. So I don't know how we get through this. I think enough. I think you alluded to the election, that at least the midterm election that's coming up. I think that'll be the first signal, right? And unfortunately for folks on the left, right? I think, and this is not like it's not like the right's winning in the market of ideas. Actually, neither side is. But
I mean, the next election is going to be it's not really a win for Republicans. It'll be a loss for Democrats.
That's exactly right. And it'll be,
because you're going to see, and the reverse in labor in the UK is because people are sick of what the people in charge, and that happens to be the Conservatives over there, the Tories.
That's right.
So you're just going to see massive people replacing left, and no matter who's in charge, it's just going to be a replacement.
Yeah, it's absolutely right. It's a vote against the establishment, whoever's in the establishment at the time. Which, I mean, frankly, that's what Obama was, and that's what Trump was, right? It's just, I think one was a little bit more rational than the other. But one thing I think that made Trump successful, though, is he bashed the media, right? Mm-hmm. And the media promoted him because he was so good for ratings. So they created their own monster. So I think that'll be the first signal, and then after that, I don't know. I don't know how we just have to calm down, right? I think Facebook is on the wane. I think they lost last week. They lost 26% of their market value because they're losing subscribers.
I barely go on there anymore. Like, there's just nothing on there.
Yeah, I just do promotional stuff, and I
Mm.
just try to keep it at that, because again, anything you put up there can be used against you 15 years from now, when, who knows what the world will look like, or how people will be treating each other. So I feel like things like coming out of the you know coming out of COVID, or coming out of the pandemic, I think things will start to get better. I mean, look, the last time something happened with this kind of cycle of history was in 1918, right, with the equine flu, and then what did you have afterwards? You had the Roaring Twenties. So,
But you also had the depression and like the
well, that
World
was
War
10
II
years
and then
later. That was 10 years later. We got 10 good years, 10 good years, and then yeah, and you can see the seeds for that right now, right? Going with what's going on with
Mhm.
Russia and Ukraine, right? So Eastern Ukraine is kind of it's not a strict analog, but it's very close to the Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia, right? Peace in our time, and who knows? We kind of did it to ourselves too with this. You have an alliance system, so you have things that are not just similar to the precursor of World War II, but you also have things that are similar to the precursor of World War One, where you have this, we pushed all of this, pushed east on NATO without constraints, and at the same time we withdrew a ton of forces from Europe. So not only do we kind of push up to Russia's border and make them feel threatened. After all, like, they have a huge history of being invaded, right? And they have a history of having a buffer and things like that, and they still got invaded. But but we do that, but we don't provide ourselves with the resources to back it up. So there's a lot of grist for future issues. Same thing with Taiwan. Like, what most people don't realize is that 90% of advanced semiconductor chips are built in the like TSMC foundries that are located in Taiwan. Like,
Mhm.
we lose that as a country, war is not optional. It's just not. Now they're moving, they're building a plant in Arizona and things like that, but people don't, like, the media is not really. There's a New York Times article that you have to look for, and it goes into all this, but the media that most people are consuming, like, we don't see any, like, this stuff is not emphasized, right? They're emphasizing other stuff that's just not super important, but is very divisive. So yeah, I almost think that, and I hate to sound cynical, but I almost think a war gets us, an external kind of war gets us out of this, right? Where people are, where they're
It
existential.
depends on if you never want war, but I feel like this time it wouldn't even be the kind of, because like my view in the aughts was very anti-war, but I still like you know I still wouldn't have gone to the point of like violence against anybody, and I'm worried that you won't be able to say that this time. Like, now you will have people like sabotaging, or killing politicians, shooting whatever.
Oh, even if there was like an externally facing war
Even if
with
there's an
like a
external
China,
face, it's
or
like we're so fractured in here that like it will just kind of spill over and become like that kind of. And again, like, we know which side is probably going to win that internal conflict, but you don't want it to happen. You don't want it to ever start.
well, it depends
And
too. It depends on how skillfully our adversaries play us against each other, right?
mm,
So, but again, that's a whole speculative dead end in terms of where you could go with that. I was going to say something else about what was I going to say? Yeah, there's just a lot of, and the other thing too is, like, the country, while not many Americans fought, right, you still have, like, that entire infrastructure. Like, people are tired. They've been at war for 20 years, And while they have a lot of practice, right, that it's I don't know if that population could sustain it without some broad, draft is probably not the right word, but you'd have to bring in a lot more people if you're facing more of a world war. And again, just to be clear, I'm not advocating that we should be going to war. I just think at this point, having a common enemy is one of the things that we need to unite folks who have been steadily over time along these two separate branches in their social media worlds and filter bubbles. That it's just hard. I mean, I would probably say for both you and I, there's probably one segment of the population that we just you sit one of us in a room and we wouldn't have anything to, like, we would have different facts,
Mm-hmm.
like different, and I think you and I have more common facts than you and that far right person would have, and me and the far left person would have, because I think as you get to the fringe, the facts are no longer about facts; they're about ideology, right? So there's a point now when I have private discussions with people on the right, and I'm generally a principle based person, right? Where it's what's the right thing to do here? What's the standard I'm holding myself? Holding against myself should be the same standard I'm holding against somebody I disagree with. And they'll say something to the effect of, "It doesn't matter. All that matters is that our side's right." It's like, what? It's just like, well, they don't care if you're right. They're not going to give you the benefit of the doubt. And in many cases, they're right about that. But that doesn't mean that you should eschew your principles and try to stay in the middle. But anyway, um, any final words? I know we're like way over. So
Oh, oh wow, I was 6:30. But yeah, I mean, just we just have to start talking about these things. I did see all these news reports today about the mask mandates failing due in large part to a lot of the parents who are, getting demonized in the media for this, but like a lot of these parents have children who have like communication difficulties, who are having severe emotional problems due to the masks. And it's like, it kind of feels like, it feels like maybe sometimes things are changing, although then I see something that shows like, oh, maybe it's not changing. But like, we just have to start talking, and we need to start writing about it, and we need to start like pointing out the bullshit when we see it. I've been trying to do more of that, trying to balance that with just wanting to be chill. But
right.
it does feel like it's somewhat less stringent than it was in early 2021 about some of this stuff, especially the COVID narratives. And it does seem like there's slightly more of a, maybe we shouldn't get everybody fired kind of thing. Of course, then, you can see like stories to the contrary. But it's just going to take people talking about it. And again, I have no idea what's going to happen for the next election. Like, that's kind of all I know is I can kind of pretty well predict what's going to happen this year. But like after that, because I can see it going one and two very different directions. And I just don't know where it's going to go. I just don't know. But I do know that like we just need to start saying how we feel more often and pointing out when something is not right, and just not being so afraid to do it. But yeah.
Yeah, my biggest concern though is I feel like we have the institutions of like a Ferrari, and I think we have, but our leaders and politicians. I shouldn't say leaders because there are plenty of talented business leaders, plenty of talented military leaders, but our politicians. We have the politicians that are like sub 70 IQ type people, and that's what scares me the most, because it's the people in power who misuse all these institutions and who degrade these institutions because they're not well utilized. So I have hope for kind of a bottoms up sort of movement, but top down,
Oh yeah,
No vote.
no
No
top
vote.
down. It will come from the workers, and although as we've seen, bottom up ones tend to be discounted from both sides if it's not the kind of bottom up revolution that people want.
Are you talking about the truckers in Canada?
The
That one?
truckers. And
Yeah.
then also, like, there's a counter example from the other side, but the truckers is a thing that's mainly in the news right
What's
today.
the counter example from the other side? Because we owe it to the audience
Um,
to.
well, I would think like like the uh maybe like the Starbucks organizing things like that. Like people will always like say like, oh well Tucker Carlson, whoever, didn't talk about like this unionizing effort or like the Amazon union, all this on their show. I don't think anybody's obligated to talk about a certain event.
Oh yeah, the
you know
Amazon, like just the conditions in the. There was a whole New
Mhm.
York Times series on that a few years back. I mean, it's just like you can't even go. Like you can't get to the bathroom. You can't. And then I've heard a little bit more about this too. Is like it's also gamed so that no matter how well you do, by the time you're up for your bump, 90 days from then, you have too many demerits, or just because you have basic human bodily functions, things like that. So
Mhm.
like there's constant churn in those positions, and it's kind of scary. So anyway, I appreciate you being on. It'll be interesting to see how people react to this. Um, but I appreciate the discussion, and I hope people check your books out, and obviously check
Pull them up again if you want.
definitely. And the other one you can't get Stay Crazy anymore. So
Can't get that one anymore. Hopefully, another publisher will take it. If any publishers are listening, I am totally about having it, reissued. I may re-self-publish it if I don't find anybody in a couple of years. But I'd really like to find another publisher who would be willing to take it,
all right,
because
well,
I think
go ahead.
it's a pretty good book. It won the British Fantasy Award, so
Yeah,
despite
it's
not really being fantasy.
it's a great book if it won the award. So anyway, I appreciate you spending time and talking about a relatively controversial topic. Hopefully, I mean, 10 years ago, this what we were saying back and forth would be completely uncontroversial. So,
Mhm.
which is why it's scary. But it was a pleasure talking to you, and good luck with your books. And I hope people come out and also read your story in Weird World War 3 and 4.
Talk to you later.
Talk to you soon.